The morning sun glimmered against the glass walls of Helix Aviation headquarters, where the roar of engines and the rhythmic clang of metal filled the air. Engineers moved with precision, clipboard in hand, checking each rotor, every bolt, and every shining curve of the helicopters lined up on the landing pad. But not everyone wore the sleek blue uniforms of the engineering team. Down near the hangar, Ethan Cole, a quiet janitor in a faded gray jumpsuit, was mopping the floor beside a half-assembled helicopter. His eyes weren't on the mop, though. They were fixed on the machine. He moved slower each time he passed it, his gaze tracing the engine casing, the misaligned rotor shaft, the misplaced wiring that no one else seemed to notice. He wasn't just looking, he was remembering. Once, long ago, this kind of machine was his life. A sharp voice broke his thoughts. "Hey, janitor. You planning to stare that helicopter clean, or actually work?" Ethan blinked and turned. It was Clara Vaughn, the company's youngest CEO, famous for her cold confidence and sharper tongue. Dressed in an immaculate white suit, heels clicking against the concrete, she looked every bit the untouchable boss. "Sorry, ma'am," Ethan murmured, lowering his eyes. Clara crossed her arms. "You're in the restricted section again. That helicopter is a prototype worth $20 million. You're not supposed to be anywhere near it." Before Ethan could answer, a group of executives laughed from behind her. "Oh, come on, Clara," one of them said, smirking. "Maybe the janitor's trying to learn something new. Or maybe he just thinks he's an engineer." More laughter. Ethan forced a polite smile and returned to his mop. But Clara wasn't done. She stepped closer to the helicopter and ran her hand along its metallic surface. "You see this?" she said, glancing back at Ethan. "This machine is the future of our company. Only the best minds get to touch it. And you just clean up after them." Her words hit harder than he wanted to admit, but he stayed silent. Clara smirked, mistaking his quiet for submission. "Tell you what," she said suddenly, tilting her head. "If you think you're so interested in this, why don't you fix it?" The room went quiet. The executives exchanged amused glances. Ethan looked up slowly, unsure if she was serious. "Ma'am?" She chuckled. "This helicopter's been giving my engineers a nightmare for a week. If you can get it running by noon, right here in front of everyone." She leaned closer, voice dripping with mockery. "I'll give you a raise. Maybe even a kiss." Laughter exploded around the hangar. Someone whistled. Ethan's face reddened, but not from embarrassment, from something deeper. He looked at her, meeting her gaze for the first time. "And if I do?" he asked quietly. The laughter faded. Clara arched an eyebrow. "If you do," she said, smirking, "then I'll personally apologize to you. In front of everyone." "Deal," Ethan said, voice steady. The silence that followed was almost electric. "Wait, what?" Clara laughed. "You're actually serious?" Ethan nodded. "If you let me try," the engineers whispered among themselves. One of them, a tall man in a blue suit, stepped forward. "Miss Vaughn, this is ridiculous. He's not certified. He could damage the prototype." Clara waved him off. "Relax, Marcus. Let the janitor have his little moment. We could all use some entertainment before lunch." Ethan set down his mop. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline he hadn't felt in years. He approached the helicopter, eyes scanning every part, every joint, every loose cable. The murmurs grew behind him. What's he doing? He's going to break it. This should be good, but Ethan tuned them out. His hands moved with the ease of muscle memory. He opened the side panel and peered inside the engine compartment. One wire caught his attention, a small detail missed by the engineers. He grabbed a wrench from the nearby toolbox, adjusted a valve, and began reconnecting circuits. Minutes passed. The laughter quieted. The only sound now was the faint clicking of tools and the soft hum of the helicopter as Ethan worked. Clara watched, her smirk fading slightly. Something about his focus unnerved her. He didn't look like a janitor anymore. "Who taught you to do that?" she finally asked. Ethan didn't look up. "Used to work on machines like this," he said simply. Her eyebrows rose. "Where?" "Army," he replied. "Before the crash," Clara hesitated. There was something in his tone, something that carried pain and pride all at once. Ethan tightened one last bolt, stepped back, and signaled toward the ignition panel. "Try it now." Marcus rolled his eyes but followed orders. He pressed the ignition switch. The helicopter sputtered once, then roared to life. The entire hangar froze. The blades began to turn, slicing the air with a powerful rhythm. Every light on the console glowed green. It was running. Perfectly. The silence was deafening. Clara's lips parted, disbelief washing over her face. The executives stared, mouths open. Even the mechanics exchanged stunned looks. Ethan wiped his hands on his jumpsuit and quietly picked up his mop again. Clara took a hesitant step forward. "How did you—" He looked at her calmly. "Sometimes the people you overlook know more than you think." Her cheeks flushed, not from anger, but from embarrassment. She had mocked him, humiliated him, and now he'd done what her entire team couldn't. The crowd's eyes shifted to her, waiting. She swallowed hard, the echo of her own words ringing in her head. "If you fix it, I'll kiss you right now." For the first time, Clara Vaughn, the untouchable CEO, was speechless. Ethan gave her a faint, respectful smile and turned to leave. Behind him, the helicopter's rotors kept spinning, filling the air with a sound that felt like justice. The sound of the helicopter's rotors still echoed in the hangar long after Ethan walked away. The engineers stood frozen, staring at the machine that had defied them for days, now humming flawlessly, thanks to a man they'd mocked. Clara Vaughn stood in silence, her heels rooted to the concrete floor. Her confident smile, the one that always masked her nerves, was gone. For the first time in a long while, she didn't know what to say. Ethan didn't look back. He walked quietly toward the supply closet, picked up his mop bucket, and continued his work as if nothing had happened. But everyone else knew something had. The executives exchanged awkward glances. A few whispered to Clara, but she didn't respond. Her sharp gaze followed Ethan as he cleaned near the corner, moving with that same calm patience that had just dismantled her pride. Finally, Marcus broke the silence. "Ma'am, I think he actually deserves that apology." Clara turned sharply, her pride stinging. "Don't start, Marcus, but I said enough!" Her voice cracked through the hangar like a whip, silencing everyone again. She straightened her jacket and took a slow breath. "Get back to work. All of you." The team scattered, pretending to focus on tasks they weren't really doing. But the murmurs didn't stop. Everyone knew the CEO had been humbled by a janitor. Clara marched toward her office, her heels clicking hard against the floor. Her face was unreadable, but inside, her thoughts were a storm. Upstairs, behind her glass-walled office, she stood staring down at the hangar. From above, Ethan looked small, an unimportant speck in a gray uniform. Yet something about him wouldn't leave her mind. How did he know so much about helicopters? And that name he'd mentioned. Army. She pulled out her phone, typing quickly. Search, Ethan Cole, Army mechanic, crash report. After a few seconds, results appeared. Her eyes scanned the screen. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole, former aircraft technician, awarded for bravery during Operation Duskfall. Discharged after severe injury in helicopter crash. 2 crew members rescued under fire. Clara's chest tightened. He wasn't a janitor by choice. He was a survivor. Back down in the hangar, Ethan finished his shift quietly. The whispers followed him wherever he went. Some of the younger mechanics smiled at him now, their earlier mockery replaced with a hint of respect. When the clock struck 5, he washed his hands, grabbed his jacket, and headed out. The late afternoon sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Ethan walked across the parking lot where an old pickup truck waited, rusted but reliable. As he started the engine, he heard the sound of heels behind him. "Ethan," he paused, turning to see Clara walking toward him. Her usual confident stride was slower this time, almost hesitant. "Ma'am," he said politely, keeping his tone neutral. She stopped a few feet away. "That was impressive, what you did today." He gave a small nod. "Just did what needed doing." Clara shifted her weight, her voice quieter now. "You made me look like a fool in front of my own team." Ethan looked at her, meeting her eyes. "You made yourself look that way. I just fixed a machine." Her jaw tightened, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. "You could have said something sooner," she muttered. "Told me you weren't just a janitor." He smiled faintly. "Didn't see the point. A title doesn't make a person worth listening to." Clara blinked. His calmness, his lack of bitterness, it threw her off balance. She'd met arrogant men, desperate ones, even broken ones. But Ethan was different. Strong, but not proud. "I read about you," she said after a moment. "The crash. Your team." He nodded, eyes distant. "That was a long time ago. Why are you here, Ethan? Why waste your talent cleaning floors?" He looked out toward the hangar. "Because machines don't judge. People do." That answer lingered in the air, heavy and real. Clara didn't know what to say. Finally, she sighed. "Well, whatever your reason, you've got talent. I could use someone like you in the engineering division." Ethan shook his head. "No, thank you, ma'am. I'm fine where I am." Her brows furrowed. "You're turning down a promotion." He started the truck. "I'm not here for positions. I'm here for peace." And with that, he drove off, leaving her standing there, watching as the truck disappeared down the road. For a moment, Clara felt something unfamiliar, a twinge of guilt. She had mocked him in front of everyone. She owed him that apology, but her pride wouldn't let her say the words. Not yet. Later that night, as she sat alone in her penthouse apartment, Clara couldn't sleep. Her thoughts replayed the look in Ethan's eyes, the quiet strength, the steadiness, the lack of anger even after humiliation. She poured herself a glass of wine, staring at the city lights below. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. She wasn't sure if it was respect or something else. But she knew one thing. This wasn't the last time she'd see Ethan Cole, not by a long shot. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the massive hangar windows, glinting off rows of aircraft and polished floors. But the atmosphere felt different, charged somehow as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Word of Ethan's miracle fix had spread overnight. Mechanics whispered his name with awe. Some even tried to ask him questions, curious about how a janitor had outsmarted a team of certified engineers. Ethan ignored the chatter. He worked quietly, pushing his mop along the edges of the hangar, his thoughts already somewhere else. Because tonight, he wasn't thinking about the helicopter. He was thinking about his daughter, Lily. She had her robotics competition this evening, the one she'd been working toward for months. She was only 8, but her drive reminded Ethan so much of her mother, Grace. Smart, determined, and kind. Lily wanted to build things that could make people's lives easier, as she often said. And every night, when Ethan came home, she showed him her progress, a small rover made of scrap parts, wires, and endless imagination. "Dad, if I win, can we go get ice cream after?" She had asked the night before, her eyes wide with excitement. "Of course," he'd said, smiling softly. "You win, and we'll get the biggest one they've got." Now, as the morning hours passed, he focused on finishing early so he could make it home in time for the big event. But fate had other plans. Clara Vaughn stood in her office, arms crossed, staring at the morning briefing slides. Her mind wasn't on the presentation. It hadn't been since yesterday. That moment in the hangar, the look in Ethan's eyes, had unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. She'd built her life around logic, structure, and control. Everything had to make sense, but nothing about him did. A war hero cleaning floors? A man who could fix a multi-million-dollar helicopter without even checking a manual? She'd spent half the night researching him. His service records were mostly classified, but she found enough. Operation Duskfall. 2 saved lives. 1 injury, honorable discharge. Then, nothing. No LinkedIn profile. No news interviews. Just silence. And that silence bothered her more than anything. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Rachel, send Ethan Cole to my office immediately. Ma'am, he's on janitorial duty. Should I?" "Now, Rachel." Her tone left no room for argument. Down in the hangar, Ethan had just finished storing his cleaning supplies when a voice echoed from across the floor. "Mr. Cole, Miss Vaughn would like to see you in her office." Every pair of eyes turned toward him again. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Ethan sighed softly and nodded. He wasn't looking forward to this. As he rode the elevator up, he rehearsed what he might say. Maybe she was going to fire him after all. Too much attention, too many questions. Or maybe she just wanted to prove a point. When the doors opened, Clara was already standing near the window, her back to him, sunlight outlining her silhouette. "Ma'am," Ethan greeted calmly. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "You really don't like attention, do you?" "Never saw the point," he said simply. "Sit." He didn't. "I'm fine standing." Clara smirked faintly. "Of course you are." She walked around her desk and leaned against it. "You made me look ridiculous yesterday." Ethan met her gaze evenly. "That wasn't my goal. I know." She hesitated, then added, "Which makes it worse." He said nothing. Finally, she exhaled and picked up a tablet. "You know, I ran your background. You were quite the engineer once." "Was," he corrected quietly. "What happened?" He looked at the floor for a moment. "Life." Clara's tone softened just slightly. "You could be doing more here, Ethan. I could put you in the technical division. Higher pay. Better hours." He shook his head. "I'm fine where I am." "Why?" "You're overqualified. You could be designing the next generation of rotorcraft, not mopping under them." He gave her a tired smile. "Designing things didn't save the people I lost. Cleaning floors keeps my head quiet." That silenced her. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then Clara said, "You're still running from something." Ethan's jaw tightened. "We all are, Miss Vaughn. Some of us just do it with less noise." Their eyes locked for a long moment. It wasn't hostility. It was something else, something unspoken. Finally, Clara stepped closer. "There's a charity event tonight at the Innovation Gala. Every major aviation leader will be there. We're unveiling the prototype you fixed. I want you there," he frowned. "That's not my place." "It is now," she said firmly. "Consider it." "An order?" Ethan almost laughed. "You don't give orders to janitors," she smirked. "You're not just a janitor, Mr. Cole," he shook his head. "I can't. My daughter has a competition tonight. She's been working for months." For the first time, Clara's expression softened completely. "Your daughter?" "Lily," he said quietly, his tone warming. "She's 8. Smartest person I know." Clara looked down, thinking. "Go to her competition," she said finally. "But tomorrow, I expect you at the office at 8 a.m. sharp. We're not done talking." He nodded once, grateful. "Thank you, ma'am." As he turned to leave, Clara called out, "Ethan?" He looked back. She hesitated, then said softly, "You were right. A title doesn't make a person worth listening to." He smiled faintly. "Glad you're starting to believe that." And with that, he walked out. That night, under the soft glow of a school gymnasium's lights, Ethan watched Lily's robot roll across the floor, flawlessly navigating every obstacle. When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. She turned toward him, her face beaming, and waved proudly. He clapped harder than anyone. For the first time in years, Ethan felt peace. Maybe, just maybe, fixing that helicopter had done more than repair a machine. Maybe it had started fixing something inside him, too. But back at the Holt Aerospace Building, Clara sat at her desk staring at a file marked Project Skybridge. In it was a design for a next-generation aircraft, a project she couldn't complete because the lead engineer had resigned months ago. Now, as she looked at the blueprints and thought of Ethan Cole, she smiled slightly. "Maybe it's time," she whispered, because she wasn't just going to offer him a promotion. She was going to offer him a second chance. Morning sunlight spilled over the Holt Aerospace Complex, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The sound of aircraft engines warming up echoed faintly in the distance. Inside the executive building, everything gleamed. Polished floors, glass walls, perfection in every corner. But for once, Clara Vaughn felt uneasy in her own empire. She sat at her desk, tapping a pen against a folder labeled Project Skybridge. Her mind kept drifting back to the janitor who wasn't supposed to be an engineer, yet had outperformed her entire team. Something about him lingered in her thoughts. The quiet confidence, the restraint, the sadness behind his eyes. It wasn't pity she felt, it was curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to name. She opened the file again, staring at the stalled blueprints. Project Skybridge had been her late father's dream, an ultra-efficient vertical lift transport aircraft that could revolutionize modern aviation. But it had hit a dead end after months of failed designs. Clara exhaled slowly. Maybe, she murmured to herself, it just needs a different pair of hands. Downstairs, Ethan clocked in like he always did. No fanfare, no special treatment. But the glances he got from other employees told a different story. "Morning, hero," one of the younger mechanics said with a grin. Ethan offered a polite nod, keeping his eyes down. He wasn't interested in fame or credit. He just wanted to finish his shift and pick up Lily from school on time. But his plans shifted the moment his walkie crackled. "Mr. Cole, Ms. Vaughn would like to see you in the design lab." Immediately, he sighed softly. "Here we go again," he muttered. The design lab was nothing like the hangar. It was quiet, sleek, lined with holographic displays and walls filled with technical schematics. When he entered, Clara was already there, standing beside a massive projection of a futuristic aircraft. "Morning, Mr. Cole," she greeted, her tone more neutral than before. "Ma'am," he replied, staying by the door. "Come closer. I want you to see something." He stepped forward, studying the hologram. It was beautiful. Curved wings, compact turbines, and modular flight systems unlike anything currently in service. But even from a glance, he saw the problem. "Your intake geometry's wrong," he said quietly. "You'll get turbulence in the left rotor during hover transition." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You spotted that in 3 seconds," he shrugged. "It's not hidden. You're using offset vectors. You'll lose stability past 50 knots. Her lips curved faintly, almost like a smile. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" Ethan frowned slightly. "What's this about, Ms. Vaughn?" Clara turned to him fully. "I want you to join the Skybridge project. Not as a janitor, as lead systems engineer." The words hung in the air like static. Ethan blinked. "You're serious?" "Completely," she said. "You have knowledge my team lacks. Field experience, adaptability, instinct. You see problems before machines detect them. That's rare," he hesitated. "I left that world a long time ago." "I know," she said softly. "But maybe that world still needs you." He stared at her, unsure what to say. "Why me?" Clara paused. "Because you fixed something I thought was impossible, and not just a helicopter. You reminded me what this company was built on. People who care more about purpose than profit." He looked away. "I can't just walk away from my current job. I have a daughter. Stability matters," Clara nodded slowly. "Then bring her here after school. We have daycare, education programs, whatever you need. She'll be taken care of." He chuckled quietly. "You really thought this through." Her voice softened. "I don't make impulsive offers, Mr. Cole, especially not to men who change how I see my own company." He met her eyes for a long moment. "I'll think about it." "Good," she said. "But don't take too long. Opportunity has a habit of flying away." That evening, Ethan sat on the floor of his small living room while Lily colored next to him. The room was warm, filled with the soft hum of the heater and the smell of homemade soup. She looked up suddenly. "Dad, are you okay? You're quiet," he smiled faintly. "Just thinking. About work?" "Yeah, did they make you clean more floors?" She teased. He laughed softly. "Not exactly." He hesitated, then said, "They offered me a new job. A big one. I'd have to work longer hours, though." She frowned. "Would that mean less time with me?" He looked at her small hands gripping a blue crayon. "Maybe a little. But it could also mean better things for us. More stability. Maybe a bigger home. Better school." Lily tilted her head. "Would you like it?" He paused. I don't know. I used to love it. Building, designing, fixing things that could fly. But I stopped because sometimes when you lose too much, you stop wanting to build. She studied him for a moment, then said simply, Mom used to say, fixing things makes sad people happy. His heart tightened. He hadn't expected that. She smiled. You should do it, Dad. I think you'd be happy again. He swallowed the lump in his throat. Yeah, he whispered. Maybe I would. The next morning, Ethan walked into Clara's office. She looked up from her laptop, surprised. You're early, she said. He nodded. I thought about your offer, and I'll do it. But only if I can still be there for my daughter. Clara extended her hand. Deal. As they shook, something shifted between them. Not just respect, but trust. Clara smiled. Welcome to the Skybridge team, Mr. Cole. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he was stepping back into the life he was meant to live. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a job. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would test his past, his heart, and everything he thought he'd left behind. Because what Clara hadn't told him yet was that the Skybridge project carried a secret of its own. And soon, that secret would change everything. The hum of the Skybridge facility filled the air. Machines whirring, computers running simulations, engineers discussing data. It had been 2 weeks since Ethan joined the project, and the entire atmosphere of Holt Aerospace had changed. People who once ignored the quiet janitor now greeted him with nods of respect. His insight had saved the company millions by fixing design flaws no one else could even see. But Ethan didn't bask in the attention. He still arrived early, worked quietly, and left in time to pick up Lily from school. Still, Clara Vaughn couldn't help noticing him. The way he focused, steady, analytical, with a calmness that made chaos around him seem manageable. She often found herself watching from a distance, wondering what went on behind those quiet eyes. But that calm was about to be tested. That morning, Ethan was reviewing turbine efficiency models when a file appeared on his monitor, something marked Classified, Skybridge Phase 2, Restricted Access. He frowned. Phase 2? We're barely through the prototype stage. Before he could open it, Clara's voice came from behind him. That file wasn't meant to be unlocked yet. He turned in his chair, surprised. Then why's it on my screen? She crossed her arms. Because the system syncs all design profiles. You must have triggered it when you ran your simulation. Ethan studied her carefully. You're hiding something about this project. Her jaw tightened. It's not that simple. Try me. She hesitated, then sighed. Skybridge wasn't originally a commercial transport program. It started as a military contract. My father's last deal before he died. Ethan's eyes darkened. Military? Yes. The design was meant for rapid field extraction, helicopter replacements that could fly farther, faster, and quieter. But after the crash that took your team, she paused, realizing her words. The government shelved it. My father refused to continue without proper testing. Ethan felt his chest tighten. You're saying the crash that ended my career was connected to this project? She nodded slowly. Your aircraft was an early Skybridge prototype. The room seemed to blur for a moment. His hands trembled slightly as memories came rushing back. The roaring fire, the smoke, the screaming of engines tearing apart mid-air, and the voices of the men he couldn't save. You knew this? He asked quietly. I didn't until I reviewed the archives last week, she admitted. That's when I saw your name. I was going to tell you, but I needed you to help fix what went wrong. Ethan stood up, pushing away from the table. You should have told me from the start. Clara's voice softened. If I had, would you have agreed to work here? He hesitated, jaw tightening. No, exactly, she said gently. But you were the only one who could correct the original design. You're the only person who understands it, not just technically, but personally. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. So this whole time, I've been rebuilding the same machine that nearly killed my team. It's not the same, she said firmly. You're fixing what went wrong. You're giving it a second life. He turned toward her, anger flickering beneath his calm tone. "And what happens when it fails again? Who takes the blame this time, me or you?" Clara didn't flinch. "Neither. Because this time we get it right." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The sound of rotor blades haunted him again, the kind that used to lull him into calm, now a reminder of what he'd lost. He walked out onto his apartment balcony, looking at the city lights below. Lily was asleep inside, her little blanket pulled up to her chin. She was his peace, his reason for staying grounded. He pulled out the old photo from his wallet, his crew smiling beside the prototype years ago. Men who trusted him, men he couldn't save. He whispered under his breath, "Maybe she's right. Maybe it's time to finish what we started." The next morning, Ethan arrived at the facility early. The air was thick with anticipation. The first full system test of the new Skybridge prototype was scheduled for noon. Clara approached him near the hangar, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You came in early again." "Couldn't sleep," he replied. She handed him a cup. "Neither could I." They stood in silence for a moment, watching technicians prepare the aircraft. The sleek machine gleamed under the bright lights, its body curved like a bird ready to take flight. Ethan finally spoke. "If this thing flies, it's not just your company that wins. My men, they get justice." Clara looked at him, her voice soft. "And if it doesn't, then at least I'll know I didn't run from it." Hours later, the hangar filled with tension as the engines came alive. Everyone gathered, watching from behind the safety glass. The Skybridge prototype lifted off slowly, hovering with precision. Ethan's fingers danced across the console, adjusting airflow and thrust ratios. For the first time, the machine responded exactly as designed. Then, the moment of truth. Transition to forward flight. "Stability check," Ethan said calmly. "All readings nominal," a technician replied. "Engage." The aircraft surged forward smoothly, slicing through the air like a blade. Cheers erupted through the control room. Clara exhaled, tears glinting in her eyes. "It's flying," she whispered. "It's really flying." Ethan smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the monitors. They'd be proud. For the first time in years, the weight in his chest eased. The ghosts of the past finally felt at peace. But as the celebration continued, Clara's assistant rushed in, pale and breathless. "Ms. Vaughn, there's something you need to see. The board just sent an emergency message." Clara frowned. "What is it?" The assistant handed her a tablet. On the screen, a confidential memo blinked red. Her face drained of color as she read the headline, "Project Skybridge, Acquisition Order Confirmed. Defense Division to resume control. Immediate transition required." Ethan looked at her, concern rising. "What's going on?" Clara lowered the tablet, her voice trembling slightly. "They're taking the project away from us." The celebration stopped cold, because in that moment, both of them realized their victory had just become someone else's weapon. The cheers in the hangar died as quickly as they'd begun. The room that had just witnessed triumph now buzzed with uneasy whispers. The Skybridge prototype hovered quietly on the runway outside, unaware that its future had already been stolen. Clara Vaughn stared at the blinking message on her tablet, her throat dry. Defense Division to resume control. Immediate transition required. They were taking everything. Her father's legacy, her company's greatest achievement, and Ethan's redemption. Ethan stepped closer. "What do you mean they're taking it away?" Clara didn't look up. "The board signed an acquisition agreement with the Defense Department last night. The Skybridge project is now classified military property." His voice hardened. "After all this? After we made it work?" "They sold it, Ethan." She finally met his eyes, guilt shadowing her expression. "They want to use it for combat deployment, stealth transport, strike missions, everything my father swore he'd never allow." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You told me this was about fixing what went wrong, about making something good out of it." "It was," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know they were negotiating behind my back. They've been planning this for months." He turned away, staring at the aircraft outside the window. The very machine that had brought him peace now looked like a ghost from his nightmares. "History's repeating itself," he muttered. "Different paint, same blood." That evening, the board gathered in the main conference room. Men in suits, faces cold, eyes sharp. Clara stood at the head of the table, flanked by Ethan, who refused to leave her side. Chairman Dalton, a man with silver hair and a politician's smile, spoke first. "Ms. Vaughn, congratulations on your success. The Skybridge prototype will revolutionize defense mobility. The government has already authorized mass production." Clara's tone was icy. "You went behind my back," Dalton smirked. "You were emotionally attached to your father's ideals. We're here to run a business, not build dreams." Ethan stepped forward. "You're turning it into a weapon. You'll risk lives. Again." Dalton didn't even look at him. "Mr. Cole, you're a talented mechanic, not a policymaker. This is out of your hands." Ethan's voice deepened. "You don't understand what you're playing with. The Skybridge's design isn't ready for combat load. You push it too far, it'll fall apart mid-air." Dalton shrugged. "That's not your concern anymore. Effective immediately. All civilian personnel are removed from the project, including you." Security guards entered the room. Clara's temper flared. "You can't do this. I'm the CEO." Dalton smiled thinly. "Not anymore. You've been voted out." The words hit like a slap. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, but Clara caught his arm, shaking her head. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness, but fury. Dalton gathered the papers. "We appreciate your service. You'll both receive a severance package. Please vacate the premises by morning." Hours later, the hangar was silent. Most of the staff had gone home. Clara sat on the floor near the aircraft, her jacket discarded, eyes fixed on the Skybridge's gleaming surface. Ethan approached quietly, a file in his hands. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. She looked up. "Neither should you." He handed her the file. "These are the control overrides. Once they move it to the military site, they'll wipe all your access. You'll lose every trace of your father's work." Clara opened the file, her voice breaking. "He built this to save lives, not destroy them." "I know," Ethan said quietly, "which is why we can't let them use it." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan exhaled. "There's a fail-safe protocol, something I built into the new control system. It disables the Skybridge permanently if activated from the core terminal." Her eyes widened. You planned this?" "I hoped I'd never need to use it," he said. "But maybe this is the only way to stop them." She hesitated. "If you do this, you'll be arrested. Maybe worse." He smiled faintly. "I've been through worse." That night, the alarms blared across Holt Aerospace. Security raced through the hangar as technicians shouted over the intercom. The Skybridge's engines suddenly roared to life, blue light flooding the runway. Inside the cockpit, Ethan's hands moved quickly across the controls, overriding command protocols. The failsafe countdown blinked red across the display. Seconds to permanent shutdown. Through the glass, Clara appeared on the runway, shouting his name. "Ethan, stop! You'll get caught." He gave her a small smile through the windshield. "It's okay. I'm just finishing the job." The hangar doors opened and the aircraft began to lift off. Security lights flared as guards surrounded the area. "Power it down, Cole," someone yelled through a megaphone. But Ethan didn't listen. The Skybridge climbed higher, its rotors slicing through the night air. At 2,000 feet, the engines flickered. The failsafe kicked in. Systems shut down one by one, rotors, fuel, navigation, until the entire craft hovered silently, then began descending in a controlled glide. He had set it to land safely before dying forever. When the Skybridge touched the ground, it powered off completely. A masterpiece turned into a silent monument. Ethan stepped out, hands raised, surrounded by armed guards. Clara ran toward him before they could take him away. "You saved it," she whispered, tears streaking her face. He smiled softly. "No. I saved what it was meant to be." As they led him away, she called after him, her voice breaking. "Ethan, what will I tell your daughter?" He turned one last time. "Tell her dad finally fixed it." 3 months later, the Holt aerospace scandal had made headlines. The government abandoned its contract after public outrage over corporate corruption. Clara regained control of the company after a lengthy legal battle. But Ethan Cole was nowhere in the news. His name was erased from official reports. Only one person kept his story alive: Clara. One evening, she drove out to a small house near the countryside, holding a small metal model of the Skybridge aircraft. Lily opened the door, her big brown eyes lighting up. "Miss Clara." Clara smiled gently. "Hey, sweetheart. Your dad asked me to give you this." She handed her the model. Etched at the bottom were 4 simple words. "For Lily. Keep building." The little girl hugged it tightly, smiling through tears. "He'll come home, right?" Clara knelt beside her, brushing her hair softly. "Someday," she whispered. "Good men always do." As the sun set behind them, the sky burned gold. And red, the same colors of the evening Ethan once watched from his balcony. And somewhere, far away, a man who once called himself a janitor stood by the sea, watching the horizon, finally at peace. Because the world might never know his name, but it would forever fly on the wings he built.